It's great to see so many people here. Do carry on introducing yourselves in the chat room. My name's Laura Overton and I head up Towards Maturity. We're a not-for-profit organisation focusing in on understanding how learning and HR can be modernised in today's workplace. And we want to really share with you some ideas, but we also want you to share with each other as well using the chat room. So please do feel free at any time to put in a comment, put in an observation, whatever you want to do. Just use the chat room to kind of connect and, as Armin says, to communicate with each other. What we want to do today is to use the next half an hour, 40 minutes, to really look at some secrets of high-performing learning and development teams, what sets them apart, and what we can do to learn from them in order to become deliver a really modernised learning strategy within our own organisations. And we'd like to be really focusing in on the practical things that we can do today. So if you've got anything you want to share, as I say, please do that. And we're a benchmarking organisation. We provide research data, but at the same time we want to really encourage conversation in the marketplace about how change can happen and how we can help each other. So what I'd like to do is to ask you a question up front. You know, the title of today's session is about modernising learning and how we can stay ahead of the game. But for you, what individual words would describe a modernised learning strategy? So, you know, what kind of things are you looking to achieve in your organisation right now? It would be great if you could maybe put some of those comments directly into the chat room now. I can see multiple people are writing at the moment and sharing some of your ideas, and I think there are so many things going on in today's workplace. You know, there's such a speed of change. Our staff are working in all kinds of different locations. There are lots demanded of people, and therefore, you know, our strategies need to kind of keep up to date with that modern kind of environment. So, Susan, your point about ownership and the learners themselves, I really resonate and relate to that. Rachel, you're talking about, you know, bringing more games-based learning into that whole process. Agility, I don't know how to pronounce your name, I apologise, but agility I think is a really big theme that we're certainly seeing as well. And that issue linked into agility, Jenny there talking about shorter learning bursts. You know, how can we support that learning environment where people still need to know new skills, need to keep their skills updated and refreshed, but be able to do it in a timely, responsive, agile way that suits the way that today's workers are actually working. Doretta, your point about tapping into the collective intelligence of the workforce, we're certainly seeing that you know, a modernised learning strategy isn't one that's driven by the trainer and by the L&D leader at the front of the class or at the front of the catalogue. So we're certainly seeing aspects of that as well. Torsten, your comment about blended learning and kind of like the social responsive. So a lot of technology-enabled themes that are coming through here that are really important to explore. Do keep the conversation going, but you know, I think these are all issues that we would really like to tackle today because I mean, I've been around in the learning industry now for around about 25 years. I know I look quite young, but I've seen a lot of technologies come and go, but one of the things that has increased year on year on year is the rate and pace of change and the understanding that us as learning individuals, we need to really be addressing some of those themes. So today what we want to do is maybe share some of the things that we've got in common. I mean, we found in our last piece of research, the Modernising Learning Delivering Results report that came out last year, is that we're seeing now more than ever a real hunger from learning and development professionals to deliver more back to the business. It's not just about delivering more courses for less money anymore, but really we're 9 out of 10 L&D leaders across the globe saying that, it's important for us now to build performance, to create an opportunity of competitive advantage through skills and talent, to facilitate that continuous learning, and to really look at ways that we're engaging learners and improving productivity that are outside the way that we traditionally have done that through a course or an e-learning course. So, some of these themes that are coming through here, Chris, you're talking about working out loud and creating not just the opportunity to learn, but Torsten, as you're saying here as well, the opportunity to apply. So we're seeing that there's a real hunger for change in the industry at the moment, and I think that's because we're adapting. To modernize means that that we're actually adapting something to modern ideas and modern methods. And certainly in our research, we've seen characteristics of modernized learning as being defined by, we need to be looking at our outputs of learning, not just our inputs. So completion rates, how much we're spending, how many people are on the stuff, they're old style benchmarks which don't resonate with this new world of work and learning that we're talking about today. We need to be talking about stuff which is responsive, that is supporting learning across the whole of the continuum of the workflow, and something that is enabled by technology. And by doing that, we can deliver more results back to the business, but that we're actually using potentially less resources and less time, both of our learners, our business leaders, and ourselves. So it's a big ask, and a lot of debates going on in the industry around that. And it's clear that we're actually doing more than we've ever been doing before. In the benchmark last year, we found that over a third of us are actually getting more money to spend, a few more people in our teams as well. So it's a very positive perspective in terms of organisations investing in learning and development. We're also reaching more audiences through the solutions that we're creating than ever before. Really kind of connecting more with management, training, professional, technical, the supply chain as well. Our extended enterprise, our customers, our partners, our suppliers, kind of really extending how we're offering services to the whole of our kind of ecosystem of individuals working in our business. And it's also very clear that today we're using more technology than ever before as well. And we're seeing something like a 200% increase in types of different technologies that organizations are using at the moment. About 5 years ago, most of us were using a learning management system, a little bit of live online learning like this, e-learning courses. But now the depth and breadth of the different tools that we're using, whether it's social, mobile, games, has really, really extended. So we're busier than we have ever been before. Now, obviously, these slides are going to be made available to you immediately after this session, and they're also going to be available up on SlideShare so that you can share them through with other people. But this sense of busyness that we're seeing in the industry, unfortunately, isn't resulting in actually achieving some of the goals that we're looking for. And you can see from this picture that actually in about 5 years ago, there was a very high demand about modernising learning strategies, and we were doing certain things with fewer tools and actually delivering a certain amount of benefits from those. But now in this year, we're finding 9 out of 10 are looking to achieve all of those things, but actually only about 30% of us believe we're making any progress. So we're massively busy and using new tools, but they're not, the tools themselves, and the fact that we've got more money to spend is not delivering against that actual program. So I'm really interested from your perspective as to what you think might be stopping us. If we've got more available, we've got more understanding about modernised learning, but what do you think is actually potentially stopping us or from achieving our goals? Because this is the crux of today's session. What do we need to overcome? What risks do we need to mitigate in order to really be able to deliver against our vision for a modern learning place of the future? And I think, Elena, that's a really interesting point there. You come straight in about not necessarily listening to the real needs of the learners. And we've certainly seen in the work that we do directly with learners is that learners are doing things for themselves, and they are engaging with learning in ways that perhaps we aren't even aware of. involving them in the conversation and listening, I think, is really, really important. I think that's really interesting, Michelle, as well, about the kind of hierarchical control and command attitude. Our learners are doing things for themselves, and often learning and development, we want to help them to do that, and yet we need to raise awareness of doing things differently with our learning leaders, business leaders as well. So really, really important. And Elena, again, I'm sorry, my eye obviously keeps coming to your name, but the issue, and I think it was mentioned before, about that when we are maybe training well, but we're not transferring that learning, we're not helping people to continue to learn and to apply back in the workplace. Mary, I agree with you as well. I think there's a lot of distractions out there. Our learners are distracted. We can be distracted. Our business leaders are distracted. It's like, how do we align what we're doing to really meet the needs of those requirements? Susan, picking up on your point, we've certainly seen that more successful organisations are simplifying what they're doing. There's so much choice, there's so much distraction. How can we really hit in to the point there? So that's a really interesting point about the fact that perhaps we might be overcomplicating some of those solutions. And Mike, I think I've been talking a lot lately about the role of managers in all of this process as well, and business leaders, because we may have a new vision for learning, but at the same time, our business leaders come to us and say, I still need that course, and how do we challenge the perception of what learning needs to be internally in order to get a new buy-in from business leaders? So some really interesting thoughts coming through here. I'm hoping what we'll be able to do is to kind of summarize some of this chat for you and be able to replay it back to you. So just do keep the conversation going, but what I'd like to do is to move on and to say, okay, if we want to modernise learning, we've got to overcome these barriers if we want to kind of stay ahead of the game in this space and really deliver against this new vision. And in order to do that, one of the things I strongly believe in is that it's important for us to all help each other. There'll be someone who's just a little bit ahead of the game than you, so what can we learn from them? What can we learn from their mistakes? What can we learn from their successes? And so really what I want to do is to talk to you today about how perhaps a more formal benchmarking process can help us to stay ahead of the game, learn from each other, and basically to improve our performance in each of these individual areas and address some of these issues that are coming through here. So I think this whole thing about changing the conversation with the line of business means that we need to be better equipped ourselves, and I'm kind of just following that chat coming through now. We really need to be better equipped with good, strong, solid evidence that says this is why we need to do things and this is what we need to do as well. And that's what I'd like to share with you in the remainder of this session. Now, those of you who know us know that we're really focused in on benchmarking, and we've got two fundamental questions that we look at Towards Maturity all day, every day, and that is, who is reporting the best learning and development outcomes, improved productivity, reduction in attrition rates, improved employer engagement, speed of rolling out new projects. And those people who are really on the ball and doing things well to achieve those results, what is it that they are doing differently? And what we've found in the top corner of this slide is that there are 6 core characteristics. It's almost like a business model for learning that typically allow us to understand those successful attributes. So things like understanding the need, listening to learners, the learner context, understanding the work context, which is bubbling up in this conversation here about the culture, the management. The capability of us as a learning and development team is really strong to build as well, and we need to really be thinking about the skills in that team as well. Our ability to engage, to connect and demonstrate value. These are the characteristics that we've found really separate effective learning teams. And in last year's study, we started to look at those that were in the top 10% of those characteristics. We measure this using the Towards Maturity Index, and we thought, let's have a look at those in the top 10% and see, can they show us anything about the future of learning that we need to be doing today? And that's really what I'd like to kind of be sharing with you. in the session today. And what we want to look at is the fact that these top deck learning organisations are delivering consistently, compared with the average, better results. So whatever they are doing, it's working. Whether they're measuring revenue, whether they're reducing attrition, whether they're trying to increase staff engagement, improving application of learning at work, more responsive, improving productivity, you name it, and these guys are consistently reporting more of those benefits. So it's really worth us digging in what really sets those top deck organizations apart, because by understanding that and distilling the evidence from top performing teams, it will really help us understand how we can take the next step forward in our journey. So the first thing I want to share with you today is the fact that those top deck organizations, those that are getting those types of results, absolutely make alignment to business needs a key priority. Typically, around about just over half of learning and development people in our study agree that their learning and development activity is aligned to the needs of the business. But 100% of the top deck teams are really focused in on that. And you could say that perhaps those top deck teams are maybe one type of organization, the very big organizations, but we find that there's a whole range of different organizations who are in the top deck teams. It's not just about size or budget or anything like that. And in fact, one of our top deck organizations who've been benchmarking with us for a while is PwC. And in a recent report, Sarah Lindsell, who heads up their Modernising Learning approach, made this comment, and she said, it doesn't matter where you sit in the business. Business alignment is absolutely king. It doesn't matter if it's a performance issue, a skills issue, but our job as learning and development professionals is to solve business problems. And I think this is a really interesting and appropriate area. Now, Jan, you're asking about who the top tech are, and because it's all completely confidential, we don't share all of the names, but there are 4 that are covered in our report. PricewaterhouseCoopers, we've got a charity, the NatSen, social research, Marks and Spencer's in the UK is one, and another organisation that I'm going to be talking about a little bit later. So it's a real variety of organisations. It's not one sector or one industry that sets ourselves apart, but the first characteristic is this issue of they're having conversations with the business about what they can do to solve business problems, rather than with the business of what they can do to justify the new investment in a game or a learning management system. So alignment to need is the first characteristic. The second characteristic is the fact that the learning typically is extended way beyond the course but the way that we work is extended beyond the course. I'm working today from my home office. I could have been working in Starbucks. I could have been working all over the place. And typically these top deck organizations understand that and know that where their workers are working, their learning has to follow them. So again, only about half of us have got that attitude of the fact that our role as learning and development is to actually support learning in the course and beyond it, directly in the workflow. But 100% of those top deck organizations are looking at ways of supporting learning in the workflow. And I think just picking up on the comment in the chat rooms is that, these behaviours, L&D professionals from 44 countries around the globe have now come into this programme. And we're not necessarily seeing that certain countries are different from others. We are typically seeing that these kind of behaviours are characteristic right across the globe. So, we have a very high proportion that's coming from Asia Pacific, from Europe, and from the UK, and about 44% of our organisations that come in from have a multinational perspective as well. So they may be answering from one country, but they're working around the globe. So, and again, some of these top tech organisations are multinational organisations like PwC. Others are more localised as well. So it's not about where you're based or who you're doing it. It's the kind of things that you are doing to adapt. The next area that I wanted to share with you in terms of the top deck organisations is the fact that they are using technology. They allocate twice the budget, proportion of their budget. However, the size of their budget, they're likely to allocate more of it to using technologies. But it's not all being thrown into the learning management system or the e-learning course or bringing external libraries. They're clearly much more creative in the way that they're using technology in that space. So they are twice as likely to be using things like user-generated content. You mentioned earlier in the chat about looking at areas of interest that are focused in on collaboration and how do we encourage sharing. And these top deck organizations are using more of that. They're using a lot of video from outside the organization and inside. They're using a lot of blogs, the ability to reflect and engage. They're curating content from lots of different areas to make life easier, simpler for their learners. They're using things like badges, for example, to acknowledge and accredit learning as well. And more importantly, they're not just saying we've got a game or an e-learning course, but they're really blending their approach to the whole learner experience through a wide range of technologies that allow people to learn from each other, to apply, to reflect, to share, to engage, and to keep that virtuous cycle of learning going forward. So it's not the types of technologies, but how they're being blended together. And one of the examples that we have in our top deck group is an organization called WorldMark. Now it's relatively small, only a couple of thousand people. They're based all around the globe in manufacturing sites. They manufacture labels. So they've got a sales organization, they've got a global organization, and they're relatively small. But what they did, and it's an award-winning program, it's won several awards now, is that they went out and they said, well, what are the skills that the business needs in order to achieve its business objectives? It was a program that was driven by business in conjunction with HR. A lot was done listening to the learners up front to bring their perspective and alignment in before the academy approach, which is an online approach. It connects people, it provides formal learning, it provides the informal learning, a chance to kind of connect through communications. It's transformed their communication strategy as an organization, and it's delivered some really powerful bottom line results in terms of talent processes. More people are being recruited and brought on internally within those organization. It's improved sales, it's improved time to market, because of the way that they've been combining these different technologies. A small organization, a manufacturing organization, one working across many different cultures, really showing how all of these different angles, the role of technology, alignment, and the active voice of the learner is coming together. But I'd like to kind of turn back to you to ask you another question, because we've talked a lot about your vision, what's holding you back, and a few characteristics of the top performing learning teams. But what new skills do you think that the learning and development function needs to develop in order to deliver or support that kind of modernized learning strategy in your organization? So do start to kind of perhaps share some of your thoughts and ideas here, because this is a new world. It's a technology-enabled world. It's a business-oriented world. It's a world where the learners have more say than we're perhaps used to. So what kind of new skills do you think that attitudes and capabilities do we need to be building in ourselves into the learning and development team in order to make this transition? So I think, Melanie, the consulting skills that you're talking about there, I think that's, and Chris as well, that those influencing skills, I think that's actually a really important aspect. You know, having the confidence to hold our heads high and influence change within an organization is definitely something we see in those top deck learning organizations as well. And that obviously comes as well down to, as you say here, the understanding of the business as well. We need to be able to connect and understand with that. I think, Rob, you've hit a good nail on the head there in terms of, you know, how do we help the business to facilitate learning as well. So the power of coaching, the role of the line manager in all of that whole process as well, I think is going to be a really important thing for looking at this. And Susan, I think also that's a really powerful point. You're talking here about learning professionals can't do everything. The key point I wanted to make is that those top tech organizations, we're building those skills actively today. They're not waiting and saying that's what we need in the future, but they're proactively looking at things like program evaluation, our role in supporting learners online, our engagement, marketing, stakeholder engagement, the types of things that we were talking about earlier. You know, these top tech organizations are actively building those skills as we stand today. Interestingly as well, they are 50% more likely than the average I don't want to say the average person takes part, but the average in towards maturity benchmark to be actively providing continuing professional development opportunities for ourselves, for themselves, for their own teams, as well as supporting learning. Typically, I think it's about 30% of learning and development people actually say, you know what, we're not sure how our own staff are building their own skills. We're not being proactive in designing the skills that we need for ourselves, even though we want to be designing the skills that we need for our business. So it's really important that we look at that and we learn about how do we build our own capability. The final area about the top deck people that I wanted to share with you was the fact that they are much more likely to be using evidence to inform their decisions. There's a lot of things going on in the world of learning and development at the moment. The role of games, the role of mobile, the 70-20-10, and a lot of people are saying, okay, well, let's try that, or we've heard this about millennials, we need to do something for millennials, and we're not actually using data about our own information or about learning and development in general to inform our decisions. So some of the things that I've been sharing with you about alignment, about communication, about skills of L&D professionals, the data shows that actually those organizations are really, really strong in doing those things. It's not the tools and the technologies that they're using, it's some of the things that we've just been sharing. But only fewer than 25% of us actually use that kind of evidence and that data inside our own organizations to inform our strategy, and yet 7 out of 10 of the top deck learning organizations engage in data-driven decision making. They use evidence, they take part in benchmarks, they bring that evidence back into their organizations, and they use it to inform their own decision making, and also more importantly they use external evidence to influence change back with internal stakeholders. So you know, things like the top deck organizations, the Modernising Learning reports have been used extensively by learning and development professionals to open up a new conversation with internal stakeholders to be thinking about that. So using data to inform our decisions is really, really critical. And I think this was very interesting. Colonel Gary Hearn in the UK military in the MOD was acknowledged actually by Her Majesty over here for his services to transforming learning, and he said change was really difficult. He has like 600 trainers in his military college, but for them the change started by presenting their existing staff with independent evidence from their learners. We heard about that from yourselves earlier, from experts showing the need for change, and that independent evidence gave people the confidence to open up new conversations and to have new discussions about where learning needed to go. So having an evidence-based strategy, I think, is really important, regardless of your of your backgrounds as well, and also of your country. And I think so when you're talking there about convincing the work councils, you know, bringing some independent evidence about what other organizations are doing, what competitors are doing, what your learners are doing. My create an opportunity to have a discussion that perhaps wasn't there before, because everyone comes to this with their own views and opinions, and everyone is right. So that independent evidence creates an opportunity to kind of say, okay, well, let's look at this from an alternative angle, and to be able to go into that process. So, you know, that role of evidence is absolutely powerful, and really that's what I'm trying to do today, despite the interruptions, is to equip you with good evidence that will help you modernize your learning strategy and kind of stay ahead of the game. So just to kind of close that off, you know, we've talked about, I need this summary slide even for myself now with the comings and goings, but the top organizations, there's an alignment. So the evidence says business leaders, learning leaders, we need to be talking together in new ways, supporting that full learning continuum, harnessing the technology in the right way, building the skills that we need in the learning and development function to allow ourselves to be equipped as agents of change, and to create that firm foundation of evidence-based decision making. So just to kind of close off, I think a lot of us are on this event. We know what we need to do to modernize learning. So we know it has to support needs, staff need to learn in convenient places or whatever. We've been tracking how many people do this year on year for the last 10 years, because we know these are good practices that are not, there's nothing new here. And what we found over the last 3 years is actually there isn't a lot of progress overall. We talk a lot about alignment, but still only 3 in 5 for the last 5 years have been doing this. We talk about the fact that as learning and development teams, we need to be more confident in new media, and yet only 3 in 10 of us in the last number of years, despite all of the opportunity to learn, we're actually doing these things. But the top deck organizations today now are proactive in each of these areas. They not only know what they need to do, but they're also doing it as well. So there's a clear call to action here, is to take the things that we ought to be doing and actually doing them. It's common sense. So I just want to close off, because I'm conscious I've taken quite a bit of your time. Do start to ask me questions here, but I think there are 3 things that we need to do in order to kind of take this forward in our own organizations. I think it's really important, if we're going to be applying the learning, even the learning we've had today in this last half an hour, into our own situations, we need to step back and we need to reflect. Emma Webber, in her book about turning learning into action, talks about specific, structured, accountable reflection that helps us apply learning. And, you know, one of the things that I would encourage you to do to kind of apply what we've learned today is to kind of maybe use the Tools Maturity Benchmark that's open at the moment to systematically go through some of these questions for yourselves, looking at your strategy, your goals, your vision, your current and planned offering. We take you through the tactics of every single top learning team, and we find that just people who take that hour to reflect on their strategy with the benchmark, 84% of them walk away with new ideas to put into practice. So the first thing, you know, to take an evidence-based approach to help you stay ahead of the game is to reflect, use a benchmark to do that. The next thing is you need to not just reflect, but also prioritize your actions as a result of that, and we help you do that by sending you a very detailed, personalized benchmark report that breaks down all of the qualities of the top performing organizations and helps you see where you compare with other people. And that helps you say, okay, if I'm limited, where do I start? What are the things I need to work on first? The other thing we've done is curate a resource pack on how to become a top learning organization, so everyone who goes through that reflection gets that resource pack immediately. And then the final thing is to actually do something, you know, to be bold, to take action. You are not alone in your desire to modernize learning. You're not alone in your challenges, but this kind of review, compare, act methodology, which is at the heart of benchmarking strategy, really will help you to be able to take your strategy forward. So I guess my final question to you is, what will you do differently in your organization as a result of today? And also, what questions do you have for me or for Armen in the last 5 minutes or so of being together?
I think,
yeah.
Laura, I think we had a question from Magdis.
Oh, sorry, Magdis. What was the question again?
I think she raised her hand, so, or he or she, I don't know what it is. The issue's still open,
Okay.
Magdis.
If you could type it in, that would be great. I'm trying not to press too many buttons on this system right now. Ernesto, an example of a report. If you email me, Ernesto, I can send you links to an example of the report. I'll just type in my my email address here for you, but I'd be more than happy to share that with you. Michelle, about the smallest size of the organisation. We've had small organisations take part, business leaders, up to sort of like 100 people or so. And basically, if you need a strategy for developing the skills in your business, then this is a useful tool for you to reflect. If you're a 2 or 3 man business, but if you're supporting other learning and development strategies, you might want to do it on behalf of your client. But typically, if you need a strategy or an approach to developing skills, then you're appropriate to go through this reflective process. Rachel, thanks for that, because I know that you've in Warwickshire you've been looking at the report to help drive your strategy forward there as well. So, but yeah, it does definitely covers a range of different organisations there, and in fact later on in the year we're going to be bringing out a small medium enterprise comparison report as well. So great to have people's feedback with that. So any other thoughts of multiple attendees are typing, so so that's good news. If Magdes could you could repeat your question as well, then that would be great. And also, if there's something that you have seen today that actually you think, I'm going to try that, there's something new, something fresh, or something that I knew that I now need to put into practice, do let us know that. So it's actually aimed predominantly, Eleanor, at learning and development professionals. And it's to get you to reflect on your relationships with stakeholders in the business as well. So the core one is in English for learning and development professionals. We do an additional study directly with learners, and by that we mean managers, any kind of individual learners. Unfortunately, that one isn't the free one that we can offer thanks to our ambassadors, but when we do research directly with stakeholders to bring the stakeholder voice back to you, that's in multiple languages, and we can do that in multiple languages. So I'd say I'm happy to keep the questions open, but one of the things that I would suggest is, having an evidence-based learning strategy will help you on your role to modernising learning. So we have got the link and the URL, but before we kind of leave the session, it's also great to come together as well. And I'm going to be hosting with Armin the Speexx exchange in Berlin in December. So if you want to kind of come and explore some of these themes in more detail, share some of your stories, kind of network, and we really kind of roll our sleeves up at the Speexx exchange and say, okay, well, what's the reality check of this modernised learning strategy? Where are we at today? How do we encourage each other to move forward? So this is a kind of a theme where we work with all of our ambassadors to really kind of try and support the industry as a whole, both face-to-face, through research, through webinars as well, to really kind of help people to make that shift and that exchange. So it would be fantastic if you could join us. And really that's what I would like to kind of close with that. I'm very happy to take any additional questions in the last couple of minutes. And I don't know whether, Armin, you've spotted some. Claire, you're talking about what sorts of benchmarks do we often see. I've only got a few minutes, Claire. You got me on my favourite subject of what benchmarks do we see for learning and development teams. Typically when people say, oh, I'm going to benchmark, it's really old style, inverted commas, benchmarks. I think it's really, when we look at how much does everyone get paid, what's the price of learning per hour, how many people have you got in your team, what are your budgets? What are your completion rates? None of these benchmarks helps us to actually move our strategy on. In fact, I think those benchmarks that we typically see hold us back into the past, and we're constantly comparing ourselves. We haven't got enough money. That they give us excuses as to why we're not achieving this, and that's why I think having the evidence-based strategy where we look at outcomes and we look at behaviors that deliver outcomes and allow us to measure ourselves against those, that takes away the focus on how many people have we got, how much money have we got, and into how is our thinking changing, how is our behavior changing. And I think that is the critical thing, and that's why we see top performing learning companies from the charity sector, the public sector, from different countries, because it's actually our business attitude towards redefining what learning is in that organization that's making a difference to the outcomes. So the typical benchmarks we see, the old style benchmarks, Claire, I don't think help us drive modernisation. New types of learning benchmarks we've been talking about today, the Towards Maturity Index against that model, looking at performance outcomes, that's what really helps us set the bar high and helps us achieve our objectives rather than just sit and look at how well we're doing or how not well we're doing in terms of comparing ourselves with our peers. So glad you like the idea of food there, Michelle. There's always great food in Berlin. And great beer and great Christmas markets too. Well, can I just say thank you as well. A number of comments are coming in, and thank you for bearing with us with the few technical glitches there. So definitely appreciate you joining us, and thank you very much for hosting today.
Yes, thank you, Laura, for being with us, and thanks everybody for bearing with us today. Don't blame it on the technology. Technology really works. It's probably some bandwidth issues somewhere on the line. Thanks again for being with us. Speexx Exchange, I might tell you, is about getting real, so there won't be any virtual classroom technology. We will actually be in a room. You'll be able to meet Laura again with the new version with the new findings of the new benchmark for 2016. So that'll be one of the first occasions to actually showcase that. Is that right?
Absolutely. The new report will be just out, so we'll be able to track our progress. So get involved now and then come and see the progress we're making in Berlin.
So it's not only food, which is always great at Speexx Exchange, it's also about crisp new data. So please come and join us whenever you're there. We are part of Online Educa, so even if you wouldn't come because of us, you might want to come for the bigger picture in learning technology at Online Educa in Berlin, beginning of December, as much as I know. Thank you very much for being with us. Again, please don't blame the technology. One thing that I found very interesting is the notion about blending technologies as a secret to success. So wherever, for example, virtual classrooms don't work, there's lots of different technologies that we can actually blend into a reasonable and feasible learning scenario. And I think that's what it's all about, using technology the way it works for the students best. Thank you very much. Laura, thank you again for your great contribution and for your perseverance.
Thank you. That's great stuff. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.